In a small semi-basement apartment in Seoul, the Kim family does their best to survive. Father Ki-taek, mother Chung-suk, daughter Ki-young, and son Ki-woo work folding pizza boxes for a very low wage and struggle to make ends meet. This makes them go as far as using their phones next to the bathroom window to be able to steal Wi-Fi, or keeping their windows open for the fumigator's poisonous smoke to enter the house and get rid of the bugs, even if they end up breathing it too. One evening, they are visited by Min-hyuk, a friend of Ki-woo's, who brings them a scholar's rock from his grandfather's collection, meant to be an amulet for wealth. He also brings Ki-woo a work opportunity. Since Min-hyuk will be traveling abroad soon, he wants Ki-woo to take over his tutoring of the daughter of a very rich family. Ki-woo has good English knowledge after his years in the military and trying out the university entrance exam 4 times. Ki-young can just fake his papers to pretend he's a university student since she's good with design programs, and it's not like his employers will look at them closely. The wife is very simple-minded, so Min-hyuk's recommendation should be enough. Wearing his best clothes and with a forged document in hand, Ki-woo goes to the Park family's house, which is in the fancy part of the city. After being allowed inside by the housekeeper Goop Moon-gwang, he is interviewed by Choi Young-yo, also known as Mrs. Park. Just as predicted, she barely looks at the paperwork and trusts Min-hyuk's word. But she wants to sit through the first lesson to check that Ki-woo is a good, proper man. Ki-woo will be teaching the daughter Dae, who starts off as very shy and gets startled when Ki-woo suddenly grabs her wrist. But since it's only a gesture to comfort her when she's having a hard time understanding the exercise, she quickly softens up to him. Mrs. Park is happy with what she's seen, so she decides to hire Ki-woo and pay him well after the first class. He also gets to meet Mrs. Park's son, Da-sang, who has joined the scouts and is obsessed with playing Indians. Ki-woo used to be a scout too, so he shows understanding. When Mrs. Park shows him her son's drawings, Ki-woo gets an idea. He begins talking about Da-sang's art as if it were truly a masterpiece. And when Mrs. Park mentions she needs a new art teacher because none of the previous ones lasted more than a month, Ki-woo recommends his cousin's classmate Jessica, a highly qualified art therapist. In truth, he's talking about his sister, who also shows up the next day for an interview while pretending to be this Jessica teacher after just having read some stuff about art therapy and psychology online. While Mrs. Park talks to her, Ki-woo tutors Hae, who is jealous of Ki-woo being friends with the art teacher. Ki-woo assures her he isn't interested in her. Then the two of them kiss back to Ki-young. She convinces Mrs. Park to let her give Da-sang his first lesson alone. And by the end of it, she impresses her by showing her how well behaved her son is now. She also shows Mrs. Park signs of trauma on Da-sang's paintings, mentioning an incident he went through during first grade. Convinced her son needs art therapy, Mrs. Park hires Ki-young under excellent pay. Later that day, she also meets the family father, Park Dong-ik, who offers his chauffeur Yoon to drive her home. Yoon sits to take her to her house, but wanting to hide, she lives in a poor area. To keep up the lie, she asks him to leave her at the train station because she's meeting someone. During that trip, Ki-young gets an idea and takes out her panties to hide them in the car. The Kim family begins eating better thanks to their children's new salaries while planning their next move. Meanwhile, Mr. Park finds the panties in the car and thinks Yoon has been taking lovers in the vehicle, possibly even consuming narcotics as well because no one in their right mind forgets their underwear in a car. When Ki-young leaves after class, Mrs. Park takes the chance to ask her opinion about the driver. So she tells her about how Yoon tried to take her home instead of the station. Mrs. Park decides they'll be firing Yoon under some excuse not to start a scandal. And Ki-young swoops in, saying a mature employee is more trustworthy before recommending her uncle's old driver. Of course, this man turns out to be Ki-taek, who used to work as a chauffeur. When younger, he goes for a test drive with Mr. Park, who is impressed by his good manners and his vast knowledge of the city that doesn't need GPS to reach his location. His driving is so smooth Mr. Park doesn't even spill his drink when the car turns, so he hires him on the spot. The last part of the plan is the most difficult one. Moon-gwang is a stubborn, cunning woman who has been working in that house since it was owned by a previous family. Ki-woo learns from the Hae that peaches are forbidden in the house because Moon-gwang is allergic. So, he and Ki-young begin throwing peach fuzz at her when she isn't noticing. Moon-gwang ends up going to the doctor for a checkup since she doesn't believe it to be allergies, and Ki-taek is there as well as part of the plan. He takes a selfie by making Moon Gwang appear in the background, then shows it to Mrs. Park while telling her he overheard Moon Gwang say she has tuberculosis at the house. When Moon Gwang begins coughing because of the allergies, he puts some ketchup on the tissues in the trash to make it look like she had coughed up blood. Ashamed to have a sick employee in the house, Mrs. Park makes Ki-taek promise he won't tell her husband about it, then fires Moon Gwang under some excuse, telling Mr. Park she quit. Mr. Park begins to worry about the lack of cooking and cleaning in the house, so Ki-taek gives him the card of a prestigious agency he almost worked for, giving Mr. Park permission to tell his wife that he got the idea. This agency supposedly provides families with trustworthy employees, but in truth, it's another ruse by the Kims. The phone on the card is the second number Ki-young got for this, and when Mrs. Park calls, she pretends to be a secretary, asking for lots of official paperwork. Eventually, Chung-suk is hired as the new housekeeper, and the whole Kim family is in. Song notices they all smell the same, but they realize it isn't the soap. It's the smell of their old cheap apartment. One day, the Parks leave on a camping trip and leave Chung-suk taking care of the house. So, as soon as they're gone, the whole Kim family comes over to stay for a while. They use all the rooms, eat all the food, drink the expensive wines, and Ki-woo even steals Daehae's diary to read it because he wants to propose to her when she gets into the university. The Kims spend their dinner fantasizing about what marrying into a rich family would be like while a storm rages outside. Suddenly, someone rings the doorbell. It's Moon Gwang, who claims she forgot something in the basement when she was fired and left in a hurry. While her family hides, Chung-suk lets her in. But Moon Gwang is taking too long down there, so Chung-suk goes to see what is going on. She finds Moon Gwang trying to move a cupboard, so she helps her, revealing a door behind it that takes them to an underground bunker created by the architect and previous homeowner, Moon Gwang's husband. Se has been living there for years, hiding from loan sharks. Moon Gwang helped him move there when the previous owner left and the house was waiting to be sold. And the Parks never learned about the bunker. Moon Gwang would go down there and sneak in some food for him when the Parks weren't looking, which explains why Mr. Park thought she ate too much. She came today because she knew the Parks would be gone, so she wanted to talk to Chung-suk alone to ask for permission for her husband to still live down there, even being willing to pay her for bringing him food. Chung-suk refuses to accept this and takes out her phone to call the police. But at that moment, her family slips off the stairs while trying to spy on them. Moon Gwang wastes no time and records them with her phone, capturing on camera the fact they call each other family names. Now, Moon Gwang and her husband have control of the situation, threatening to tell the Parks of their ruse if the Kims don't do as they say. After dinner, the Kims are given permission to stay the night at the Parks' house since it's too late to go home. However, they still need to find a way to get rid of the Parks for good. The next morning, they come up with a plan to frame the driver for the whole ordeal, using his smell as a basis for the framing. They manage to execute the plan successfully, and the driver is arrested. The Kims, now living in the house permanently, begin to enjoy their new life of luxury. However, their happiness is short-lived. Ki-woo finds out that Moon Gwang and her husband have died in the basement from starvation, and the house now smells terrible due to their decomposing bodies. The Kims are forced to evacuate the house and return to their old life of poverty. The movie ends with Ki-woo writing a letter to his father, expressing his hope to earn enough money to buy the house and free his father from his life of poverty. It seems that the Kims are now forced to put on a facade and pretend to be happy for the Park's impromptu party, despite their own personal struggles. Chung-suk cooks and prepares the tables while Ki-taek drives the Parks around to buy party supplies. The Kims must continue to pretend to be friendly and grateful, all the while feeling devastated about losing their home to the flood. Meanwhile, Ki-woo continues to feel upset about the situation with the Scholar's Rock and his father's lack of a plan to deal with it. He clings onto the rock as he sleeps in the gymnasium with his family. In the bunker, Moon Gwang has died from her earlier concussion, and Gunsei tries to send a Morse code message for help using the lights. However, due to his mental state, the message is gibberish and the Song family deciphers it to be nonsense. It seems that the Kims are in a tough spot, both financially and emotionally, as they try to navigate the aftermath of the storm and their loss of home. As the party continued, the tension between the Kims and the Parks escalated. Despite putting on their best smart teacher personas, the Kims couldn't help but feel like they didn't belong. Meanwhile, Mr. Park and Ki-taek's Indian act was met with mixed reactions from the guests. Feeling overwhelmed, Ki-woo sought solace in the basement with the Scholar's Rock, only to be ambushed by the deranged Gunsei. The ensuing struggle left Ki-woo unconscious and hanging by a cord around his neck. The chaos continued to unfold as Van, still reeling from the loss of Moon Gwang, took matters into his own hands and grabbed a knife. Gunsei, consumed by revenge, stabbed Ki-ying in front of everyone, causing Song to have a seizure. As the Kims scrambled to tend to the wounded and flee the scene, Chung-suk bravely attacked Gunsei with a barbecue skewer, ultimately killing him. In the aftermath, the Kims struggled to reconcile their grief and trauma with the stark reality that the Parks only cared about their own interests. With Mr. Park demanding Ki-taek to drive him and his son to the hospital, Ki-taek made a decision to prioritize his own family and threw the keys at him, determined to protect them at all costs. The keys fall onto the grass, and at that moment, Gunsei falls on top of them. Mr. Park goes to retrieve them, but even during such a deadly emergency, he covers his nose while moving the body. Enraged by such a despicable act, Ki-taek takes the knife and kills Mr. Park before fleeing the scene. Weeks later, Ki-woo wakes up from brain surgery. The injury and the procedure have left his mind in a delicate state, so he can't help but laugh through all the things that proceed to happen to him. Finding out his sister is dead and his father is missing, getting arrested, being put on trial for fraud, being allowed to leave on probation because of the traumatic incident that they aren't charged for because it was self-defense. He only stops laughing when he sees the news report recording the now empty house, making everything that happened feel more real. Neither he nor his mother knows where his father is, but the detectives keep on tailing them for a while, thinking they may lead them to him. Months later, after the news finally moves on to other subjects and the cops don't follow them anymore, Ki-woo goes up the mountain and spies on the Park's house, which is now occupied by a German family that bought it because they didn't know its history. Ki-woo realizes someone is using the lights to send a message in Morse code. It's his dad, who all this time has been hiding in the house bunker. He has buried Moon Gwang in the backyard and survives by raiding the kitchen every night. He also sends the Morse messages every day, hoping his son would see them one day. Back in his old apartment he still shares with his mother, Ki-woo writes a letter to his dad, promising to work hard and earn enough money to one day buy the house and reunite with him. That's all for now. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.